Hi, body colors in my background, and I suppose actually by the title of the video you guessed it. Today we're talking about Malta. And as my Italian friend put it, well, why would anybody want to go on that little rock in the middle of Mediterranean Sea? I actually would like to start with where it actually exists. And for that, we got a map, because I like maps. As you can see, it's right over here, squeezed between Italy and Northern Africa, and it's really tiny. So I guess it's a nice setup for something that's could be quite interesting to explore. Malta is a nice combination of three different cultures, so there is a lot of North African influence. You even notice it in their language because they also have their own Maltese language that a lot of signs are written in. They are in Maltese and English. There is some more Italian culture going on because I think of the proximity to the Sicily. And of course, as I already said, it used to be British colony. It used to be like one of the good forts, so like Cyprus was at some point of a time that was a coveted place for a lot of people in the Mediterranean, or just generally to put their forts and making sure that you're controlling the sea in this sense. So Malta, despite being so tiny, still played quite a crucial role during the dominance of British Empire back in the days. Malta is super confusing with the fact where one town ends and when the other begins. It's like a huge island-wide agglomeration in a way, because you wouldn't notice where you stepped out from Sliema and entered Gzira, and then you are in Mdina following into Valetta. So, before actually going there, I never thought about how tiny it actually is. The whole architecture style really reminds you of North Africa. There is again this mixture of a bit of a Catholic presence with some North African influence, of course, and I think the colors of most of the buildings, you would guess it, is they are made of like this yellow stone, so they are great for quite warm weather that I would imagine usually hits Malta, especially during the summer. One of the first thing we had to go visit was Valetta. There is a similar style of the architecture that we would have experienced in Sliema. Maybe the buildings are a bit more taller and a bit more fancier because, of course, it is a capital. There is a bit more of those administrative ones. There is museums, some nicer things like Upper Baraka Gardens, where people, I think, adore a lot, being taken picture over there with all these arcs that are situated with the great outlook on the other side of the other bay. So not the bay that facing Sliema, but the bay that facing Paola and other towns/districts, whatever they are actually being considered. Then, of course, there you'll be going around, you'll see the cathedrals, the more administrative buildings. They all are made in quite a distinct style. This is probably a nice way to say that they are quite lookalikes. However, out of all the churches, the most impressive one was the one with the huge dome that is actually visible only from certain parts of the city, because the streets are super tiny, they're really cramped, and this basilica with a dome was quite spectacular to see, especially with the nightlight. The other must-visit town in Malta is definitely Mdina. This is quite a common tourist attraction. The most thing spectacular part of it is definitely the old town, the city itself. This whole place is an open-air museum in a way. I was even curious whether people live in this kind of historical area or not. It preserved so well, it didn't look like a living area. As I believe they even closed the gates at some point of a time, made me think that restricted area to live in. Apparently, there is actually a lot of people with money, of course, who go and buy their apartments over there. You would pass the street filled with different souvenir shops, little cafes, so this different museums, and then going into the city walls, you have relatively nice outlook on the whole island because it's so tiny. And of course, there is some hills, but from Mdina, which is relatively in the center of an island, you'll be able to see the sea, which just a great reminder of how tiny the island is. So maybe then coming from Mdina, it's worth mentioning that there is something like what people call another like a hidden gem of the island, which is Marsaxlokk, which is pretty much a fisherman village with a port. There is quite cool looking boats that they use to go after fish. However, there is nothing much to see. There are a lot of fish restaurants. I think generally throughout Malta it is common, but I think in Marsaxlokk it's much more evident because it is a fisherman town. However, last but not the least is Itori Lahmar, or Red Tower. Actually, this castle, tower, technically, was discovered by chance because I was just scrolling through different sites that were mapped out in the Google Maps. And because, the fun fact about this tower is that it looked like it was pink in pictures that are visible on the Google Maps. So there was nothing extremely spectacular about this place. It was a garnison where knights used to live, and it was like a watchtower. It was actually dedicated to St. Agatha's. That's why its official name is actually St. Agatha's Tower. The fact that it looks way better now because of the group of activists who since 90s been working on restoring this site, and they did really well. That's why Red Tower is back to actually having its name and pretty much following it. Besides the color, this fort is not much different from any other fort that is present on Malta. But a fact of a novelty in a way, because nobody ever saw, I've never seen before a red castle, which kind of a little piece of a fairy tale that adds to the whole island experience that you go to. Speaking of which, there are two other islands where people would usually go to during their visit of Malta. Their names are Comino and Gozo. So apparently Comino is closed, and now the only way to get to Comino is to go through Gozo, which doesn't make any sense. But now we are decided to embrace in this journey and check out what's up. And this is the sun deck. We actually intended to go to Comino. However, on that particular day when we scheduled our visit to other islands, nobody from Comino came to pick people up due to harsh weather conditions or something. So it was a bit of a weird explanation, because the ferry to Gozo was going normally, but I would imagine that Comino being much smaller island, it actually, we just traveled to Gozo, and Gozo is a bit bigger. It's a bit more boring, as people were putting in a way, which I feel like is a bit of an over-exaggeration. Of course, there is not that many historical sites as in Mdina or Valetta. They are a bit different kind of places. Gozo, from what I understood, is a bit more of an agricultural island, which, still kind of crazy to think that on these three tiny rocks out in the sea, people are still, growing crops and doing all this. So it's not fully on urbanized at this point. And even though it was just 5 days that I got to spend on this archipelago, I feel like it was just enough to experience it. Maybe it was just a tiny little bit rushed. However, one thing I would love to mention, that Malta has a crazy tourist attraction which is more related to diving. And there are few synced ships that are being put on the map as tourist attractions. So you can dive and explore at your own risk, of course. So this was it, my trip to Malta. Would I do it again? Maybe. However, I would still highly recommend anyone who have their reservations against Malta to still go and explore it themselves. Again, it's a nice combination of different culture all in one place. There is enough to see, there is enough to go for more gastronomic kind of a tourism, because it has a nice mixture of cuisines as well. It's not just the looks, it's also the essence of wow. People live there. I think there is a lot of influence from Italian cuisine. I think I've eaten such a nice pizza over there with the Roman style of pizza. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, leave your comments down below. Share your experience if you've ever visited Malta, or if you're from there, and if I said something wrong or off, if you want to add something and inform me about, feel free to do so. I would love to learn more about your country or about your tourist experience if you were a humble visitor, just how I was. Thank you very much, and bye.